Okay, well, this one's going to be amusing, I think. Fury on Champlain. This is a 3W masterpiece. 8 pages of rules, one of which is almost all charts, one of which is the table of contents and explanations on the counters. So 6 pages of text and 5 pages of errata. I thought this was all preliminary errata, as noted here, but it turns out that somewhere in here it stops being the preliminary and starts including references to the preliminary errata. It all looks like one sheet of information, probably compiled over on web grognards. This was printed out and included in my box, and kind of useful because I think the game would be unplayable without it. Among other things that were missing, the land combat results table was a little bit in error. So, very briefly, combat odds, and if you notice something interesting, the same values are repeated no matter what the odds in the original. So I have this fine little replacement sheet, which certainly looks a little bit more reasonable, I guess. At least the odds mean something. All right, well, let's kind of go over this. This is the Plattsburgh campaign of 1814. And what's kind of interesting about the game is that it combines both land and naval operations. The naval operations are somewhat more abstracted, with the sea zone, well, the lake zones, being areas rather than hexes, and you have engagements in those areas. I'm not going to go completely over the rules. God knows if I haven't even set everything up. There's some more English I got to get in place. Some militia and some engines. Let's see, I'm not going to go completely over the rules. There's 12 turns the British have to do 2 things. One is to take Plattsburgh, and I think they have to take all of it. The central spot in Plattsburgh is already being fortified by the Americans. And the second is they have to win a naval victory and get 2-to-1 total guns on the American Navy. Now the British Navy is over here, the American Navy is over here. Both sides get very limited reinforcements. The English get a leader, and the Americans get some additional militia. However, as militia is destroyed and the Vermont volunteers are considered to be not yet raised, there's a chance of bringing it back off the militia availability table. You roll a die on each turn to see if you get the militia. That's good because there's also the militia unreliability table. If militia start move adjacent to enemy units, and I think it may also be if enemy units move adjacent to them, or if American militia, well, that's for American militia. For either side, Canadian or American, if they're in the wrong country. So if American militia go invading Canada, there's a chance that they might not disband, but just not be willing to enter or refuse to move. On the other hand, they'll disband. They just they refuse to move instead of retreating. Sorry. For the Canadians, that's the only thing that'll bother them. They'll stand and fight if Canada's invaded. So the few Canadian militia I have will serve fairly well to defend things. All right, let's go over a little bit about the game. Not too much into the rules. Base sequence of play. Each player gets a turn. They get their reinforcements. They get a naval phase where they do movement in combat. They get a land phase where they do movement in combat. The wind direction is determined at the beginning of each turn. It can shift. It doesn't specify which way it starts the game. At least not that I can find in the rules of errata. But there's a lot of things like that. So, you know, the English like boats better, so I let them choose the wind to begin with. If you leave your ships out at open sea, there's a chance that they might get damaged by gales. And you're allowed to anchor, which provides a combat variation. Yeah, bonus, really. If you're anchored, you probably have it looks like it's a pure bonus in combat. It's a little odd. Naval interception or withdrawal is handled based on the naval leader. And this is very much like some of the CDGs, if you roll less than their leadership or less than or equal to their leadership, they can do one of those things. Interception to an adjacent area, withdrawal away from the enemy force. And no real penalty to doing so. Naval combat itself, there's this little diagram. You basically line your ships up and shoot at each other. No big excitement there. One-on-one almost, except you could have a second line that fires at a penalty and can't be shot. The ships themselves are represented as a bunch of flotation guns and short guns. Well, long guns and short guns. Long guns can fire at long range. Short guns can fire only at short range. Long guns can fire at short range too. You sum up the number of guns you got firing at a particular ship, and this chart was done right, and you get a number of hits, and those hits are divided into hits on flotation and hits on guns, marked off on the table. Take enough flotation hits, and that's not all of them, just enough, which is enough to drop you down to less than 6. There's a chance that you sink, or actually strike colors. If you take all of them, you sink. There's rules for running aground, which can happen here, and I think there are other places where it might be able to happen. Let me see what else we've got here. Anyway, the naval combat's done in rounds until, I guess, one side leaves or is completely captured. There's you start out at a long range. If you're in sheltered water, the kind of pale blue, that immediately closes to close range. If you're in deep water, you have to try to close, and that only happens on a 6. And the other player can try to open range again. So you can try to keep it at longer range for that. On the ship charts, the other number up here is how much it can carry, how much stuff it can hold. We got a couple of transport ships as well, which can't really fight, but if they end up alone with enemy ships, they strike and become captured. That's the thing. You can capture the enemy's ships, and then you can convert them to your own. There's one ship, I think a British ship, that's already, and I haven't marked it off yet, it's one of their big ones. I think it's the Saratoga, or not the Saratoga, the Confiance, which I think is a full frigate, which isn't completed yet. And I've got to mark off a bunch of things, like 8 guns from each of these, and all the light guns, and I think 18 flotation marks. Now, damage, or the Confiance for building, is handled using, it can be repaired, and you use the Naval Combat Results chart for that. Depending on the terrain you're in, you use different columns. If you're in a home port, you use the best column available for this. I don't remember which one it is, maybe the 9 to 10 or something. If you're out at the open lake, you roll on a 1 to 2 column. So you can still repair yourself out there a little bit, maybe. What kind of cute little stuff there. There's 2 places. We got Crab Island, but there's another one. Is it this? Yeah, Isle en Naut, which have batteries available, and I'm not sure why the Isle en Naut battery is not got a counter. Which can fire into naval combat in their own space. They count as a ship, basically, for naval combat, and that's all they do. They can take hits. Now, here's the problem. The Crab Island one needs to be manned, and it is manned by regular infantry, or there's some convalescents, or there's some really, really sick people you can give the guns who are good for nothing else. and that's what historically the guns were manned by. But they take casualties before the guns take hits, so whatever you've got crewing them can keep dying, and you got to bring more people in. The movement combat looks pretty simple for the most part. Got zones of control, got road movement, nothing too exciting here. There's a terrain effects chart, which I haven't looked at too carefully. You'll notice some interesting things on it if you do look at it. Not so much the cost. Light units can move different, and I'm never going to remember what's light and what's not. The Canadians are light, and then there's like a few other things that are, but not everything. There's no clear distinction on the counters, which is a shame. Effects on combat, in some cases, so it can be impossible to fight. Well, it's impossible to move in, that's fair. You attack adjacent units not in your same hex. I know some games of this period have taken that. But most of the effects on combat are related to losses. How many losses an attacker or defender gets. And in some cases, it can actually, like dense woods, reduce the losses for both sides, which I think is very, very valid. How's combat handled? Well, you use this little slip of paper, and it's done on a regular combat odds table. There's some modifiers here somewhere. Damned if I know where. Well, there must be modifiers, because it goes from -1 to 8. Leaders definitely modify. I'm not sure if anything else does. Anyway, one would think that maybe the die rolls would be affected, but that's not the case. They indicate losses attacker to defender, and those are steps. Most bigger units have 2 steps, some smaller ones, and these are kind of replacement units, they're pretty small. They look like they have 2 steps, they don't. These are actually outposts. The British have command control rules which insist that they kind of keep their regiments together. Well, you can kind of break those by breaking units into these smaller units, but you still have to be under someone's command at that point. And in order to break that, you can flip them over, make them outpost units. They don't move as much. More than that, Prevost, their fearless leader, who's somewhere here, and very well rated at 0 leadership rating, has a great worry about having his supply lines cut. So every hex has to be defended either by a regiment, no, not one of these breakdown units, or an outpost unit. So he can use those for that. They're not allowed to attack or anything else really. Supply is a factor in this game, and each side has a pile of supply markers in their available, well, that says eliminated, but to me it's going to be the available box. And every time you fight, well, every time you attack, and any time you want to defend at full strength, you have to spend a supply marker. And that works for up to 3 hex range from the supply marker. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fighting in the game. Land combat only, naval don't need it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of fighting in the game, but beyond that, you also have to be able to trace a line of supply from your supply back to one of your entry hexes. I think you may be able to do it to a village or something like that. We also have decoy and spy markers. Yeah, they threw everything into this, didn't they? Except for the rules. They skimped on those. They decided, 8 pages is enough. I know we had 13 pages of rules. Let's cut 5 of them out, and maybe the players will be able to figure them out. Now, the errata is a little extensive and probably doesn't need to be as long as it is, but that makes it harder to cope with. And in some cases, some of it's very necessary. But some examples, somewhere there's the back of the box has a piece of errata associated with it. Come on. And what else? Some of the errata refers, there's like lines of errata that say, hey, go look at the preliminary errata for this. There's also an interesting one that I brought up on war games on your table list. I'm trying to remember what it is. It states that this is the important changes to the role. I can't find it. It's on 12.11, but it's probably on a different set of errata for it. What else? Americans can build roadblocks. They can blow bridges. They can do all kinds of little things. And there's engineers who can, just 1 unit per side, who can try to repair that type of effect to try and slow the English advance. And that's important because there's almost nothing up here, and it comes down to a fight along the Saranac River. Saranac River is interesting. Prevost has specific limitations there, which is he cannot attack across the Saranac River. So, or is it the Saranac? Saranac, yes. The springs, Saranac Springs. Anyway, what that means is not absolutely clear because of the decoy markers. If I put decoy markers all along here, I don't think that the British can actually cross. The English do not have any decoys in the base game, and they do not have any spies. The only way to find out what a decoy stack contains, or what any stack contains for that matter, is to use a spy on it. You can use spies either by moving them, I think it's next to a unit, or having enemy units move through the spy. You may have to actually enter the hex with a spy. And then you roll on the spy table, which presumably, I haven't looked at it, yeah, it can delete your spy. And you may get him back at some point or not, and you may get some information on him. But anyway, Prevost is unwilling to attack across that river, and there are some what-if scenarios that give him more freedom for that. So that makes Plattsburgh a little better anchored than anything else. I'm not quite sure what the historical situation on this battle was because it's a previous campaign that I'm more familiar with, this, and actually not on this lake. Some little other special rules, ferrying across the Vermont area of Lake Champlain to get the Vermont garrison or militia over a little faster. One of the options is Izard's Brigade, which almost, I think, doubles. There's a pile of extra. The American forces. And another takes away Prevost's restrictions. That is about it that I can think of. Oh yeah, another option allows you to bring another U.S. ship into place. Izard's Brigade apparently had just marched away right before this campaign started, so it would not be unreasonable to have said, hey, maybe he would be here. Just like it would not be unreasonable that the English might have a better leader on the field, I guess. Most of the English units start off the map, 3 regiments coming in, marching in. They can't cross into New York at the beginning of the game, but starting on turn 2, both players get turns. Turn 1, only the British get a turn. Turn 2, both players get turns, and from then on, and the English can make their invasion. It should be kind of interesting, with the naval battle probably being the key element in what kind of happens in the game. If the Americans can win that and maybe do some sort of cutting off of the British supply because of that, that would be huge. On the other hand, if the American Navy, the American Navy has to be defeated for the Brits to win in this scenario. All right. Well, I'm going to send this one up. I probably am not going to get started tonight, but just kind of talking about it a little bit makes it less likely that I'll run away from it and hide. It doesn't look that bad. It may actually be one of the more interesting things that 3W put out because there are a lot of little pieces here, and they don't seem completely flavorless. In some of their games, I've really, really felt like they spoiled a good subject by making the game. In this one, this may be a very, very interesting game, actually. Certainly puzzling through the errata was.